Now that you're spending more time indoors, you've started to notice things. The leaky sink, the faded paint, and suddenly your to-do list looks pretty long. But when you have Thumbtack, you know exactly how to start. Thumbtack's the app that finds local pros for you. It shows you prices, reviews, and when they're available. You can find a great plumber, painter, pretty much anyone. Your to-do list doesn't stand a chance. Download Thumbtack today.
Now on impeachment. Tomorrow, the second impeachment trial of Donald J. Trump will commence. Only the fourth trial of a president or former president in American history, and the first trial for any public official that has been impeached twice. For the information of the Senate, the Republican leader and I, in consultation with both the House managers and former President Trump's lawyers, have agreed to a bipartisan resolution to govern the structure and timing of the impending trial. Let me say that again. All parties have agreed to a structure that will ensure a fair and honest Senate impeachment trial of the former president. Each side will have ample time to make their arguments, 16 hours over 2 days for the House managers, the same for the former president's counsel. If managers decide they want witnesses, there will be a vote on that, which is the option they requested in regard to witnesses. The trial will also accommodate a request from the former president's counsel to pause the trial during the Sabbath. The trial will break on Friday afternoon before sundown and will not resume until Sunday afternoon. As in previous trials, there will be equal time for senators' questions and for closing arguments, and an opportunity for the Senate to hold deliberations if it so chooses. And then we will vote on the article of impeachment. And if the former president is convicted, we will proceed to a vote on whether he is qualified to enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. The structure we have agreed to is eminently fair. It will allow for the trial to achieve its purpose, truth and accountability. That's what trials are designed to do, to arrive at the truth of a matter and render a verdict. And following the despicable attack on January the 6th, there must be truth and accountability if we are going to move forward, heal, and bring our country together once again. Sweeping something as momentous as this under the rug brings no healing whatsoever. Let's be clear about that. Now, as the trial begins, the forces aligned with the former president are prepared to argue that the trial itself is unconstitutional because Donald Trump is no longer in office, relying on a fringe legal theory that has been roundly debunked by constitutional scholars from across the political spectrum. Just yesterday, another very prominent conservative Republican constitutional lawyer, Chuck Cooper, wrote in the Wall Street Journal that Republicans are dead wrong if they think an impeachment trial of a former president is unconstitutional. Here's what he wrote, quote, "Given that the Constitution permits the Senate to impose the penalty of permanent disqualification only on former office holders, it defies logic to suggest that the Senate is prohibited from trying and convicting former office holders. The senators who supported Mr. Paul's motion should reconsider their view and judge the former president's misconduct on the merits." That's no liberal. That's Chuck Cooper, a lawyer who represented House Republicans in a lawsuit against Speaker Pelosi, a former advisor to Senator Cruz's presidential campaign, driving a stake into the central argument we're going to hear from the former president's counsel. Now, I understand why this fringe constitutional theory is being advanced. For the past few weeks, the political right has been searching for a safe harbor, a way to oppose the conviction of Donald Trump without passing judgment on his conduct, to avoid alienating the former president's supporters without condoning his obviously despicable, unpatriotic, undemocratic behavior. But the truth is, no such safe harbor exists. The trial is clearly constitutional by every frame of analysis, by constitutional text, historical practice, Senate precedent, and basic common sense. A president cannot simply resign to avoid accountability for an impeachable offense, nor can they escape judgment by waiting until their final few weeks in office to betray our country. The impeachment powers assigned to the Congress by the Constitution cannot be defeated by a president who decides to run away or trashes our democracy on the way out the door. This trial will confirm that fact. The merits of the case against the former president will be presented, and the former president's counsel will mount a defense. Ultimately, senators will decide on the one true question at stake in this trial. Is Donald Trump guilty of inciting a violent mob against the United States? A mob whose purpose was to interfere with the constitutional process of counting electoral votes and ensuring a peaceful transfer of power. And if he is guilty, does someone who would commit such a high crime against their own country deserve to hold any office of honor or trust ever again? Consistent with the solemn oath we have all taken to do impartial justice according to the Constitution and laws of the United States, that is the question every senator must answer in this trial. I yield the floor.
Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. We begin today with the politics lead. You've been listening in the first few minutes of the show to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, speaking ahead of the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump, which is set to begin in less than 24 hours. Schumer there laid out some of the details of what he claims will be a fair and honest trial of the former president. The proceedings will include 16 hours of arguments by each side, the House impeachment managers and the president's defense team. It will also include a vote over whether or not to include witnesses. Let's get right to CNN's chief domestic correspondent, Jim Acosta, in West Palm Beach, Florida, near where the former president is. And Jim, Schumer just announced a deal has been reached on the basic format of the trial.
Oh, that's right, Jake. It sounds like if they do get the votes to convict former President Trump of inciting that insurrection, not only would he be, I guess, theoretically removed from office, although he's not any longer in office at this point, potentially they could move on to a vote, or it sounds like they can move on to a vote to disqualify Trump from ever holding office again. It does sound as though the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and his Republican counterpart Mitch McConnell have reached an agreement on how all of this is going to play out over the next week. Could be 2 weeks, Jake, from what we understand, talking to our sources. In the meantime, though, the other news of the day coming from this impeachment trial is that the former president's impeachment team has revealed some of its defense strategy if the Senate somehow decides to convict the former president. His impeachment team is saying that it is unconstitutional to even put him on trial at this point. But one former White House official told me the president should be held accountable for the events that took place on January 6th. At one point, this official told me the former president at one point was, quote, loving the Capitol mob.
Scrambling to escape accountability for the insurrection he helped incite on January 6th, Donald Trump's defense team is arguing the former president is totally blameless for the bloody siege at the Capitol. In their latest filing before the impeachment trial begins Tuesday, his lawyers are blasting the proceeding as a selfish attempt by Democratic leadership in the House to prey upon the feelings of horror and confusion that fell upon all Americans across the entire political spectrum upon seeing the destruction at the Capitol on January 6th by a few hundred people. But former aides tell CNN a different story, that the then president was enjoying the spectacle, with one ex-White House official saying Trump was loving watching the Capitol mob. Arguing the evidence of Trump's conduct is overwhelming, House Democrats will seize on the former president's own words to make their case.
And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to try and give them the kind of pride and boldness that they need to take back our country. So let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue.
Trump's defense team argues his statements cannot and could not reasonably be interpreted as a call to immediate violence or a call for a violent overthrow of the United States government. But Democrats plan to point out Trump supporters appear to be following his commands as they unleash their assault.
Go home and go home in peace.
Noting how some in the mob seem to obey his call to go home.
Donald Trump asked everybody to go home. We won day.
Then there was the Trump tweet targeting Vice President Mike Pence, just as he was in danger at the Capitol. Still, Trump's lawyers insist it's unconstitutional to hold the trial after their client has left office. That may be enough to stop Democrats from persuading the 17 GOP senators needed to convict. President Biden says Trump should speak up if he's innocent.
Look, we've got an offer to come and testify. He's decided not to. We'll let the Senate work that out.
And one of the details coming out of what Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer just told the Senate a few moments ago is that each side during this impeachment trial will have 16 hours over 2 days to present their arguments. That means that this trial is going to be lasting for several days at the very least. Could last well into the weekend and perhaps into next week. In the meantime, a source close to Trump tells me the ex-president expects to be acquitted at this impeachment trial, noting that there aren't nearly enough Republican senators to vote to convict during these last 2 weeks out of office. We should also note the former president has been fixated, Jake, on punishing GOP lawmakers who voted to impeach him, like the Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney. One Trump advisor told me the ex-president sees his efforts as, quote, seeking, quote, accountability for lawmakers who crossed him and went against what he feels are the interests of the people who supported him in the last election. Jake.
All right, Jim Acosta, thanks so much. Minutes ago, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, of course, also argued that Republicans are searching for a way to oppose the impeachment conviction of Trump by calling into question the constitutionality of trying a former official, in this case a former president. Joining us now to discuss the legal issues of the impeachment trial, George Conway, a noted conservative attorney and Trump critic. George, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. So Trump's attorneys are arguing that the former president was simply exercising his First Amendment rights when he was inciting, in the view of the House impeachment managers, inciting the riot, and they defended his speech on the morning before the attack. They write, quote, notably absent from his speech was any reference to or encouragement of an insurrection, a riot, criminal action, or any acts of physical violence whatsoever. Mr. Trump never made any express or implied mention of weapons, the need for weapons, or anything of the sort. As a legal matter, George, do you literally have to use the word insurrection to incite an insurrection?
No, not at all. I think what a court would do, and what the impeachment court, the Senate, should do, is to look at all of the facts and to look at President Trump's words in context. And in context, his call to fight, his call to march on the Capitol, his earlier statement that January 6th is going to be wild, and many, many other statements, including the ones that were quoted in the video about him essentially saying that you need to save our democracy, all of you people. The court or the finder of fact has to look at all of those facts to determine whether or not what Trump said and did was imminently a cause of the rioting. And that's what the First Amendment says. The First Amendment doesn't protect imminent statements that imminently can cause violence. But there's another reason why his argument fails, and it's the fact that he was president of the United States. The fact that he is president of the United States and took an oath of office to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States means that he does not have a First Amendment right to tell people for 2 months that the election was stolen when he knew full well, he told his own aides such, that he lost, and lie about the integrity of our election, and then call upon people to fight to save our democracy from a stolen election. His duty is to prevent is to make sure that there's a peaceful transition of power, and not to do something like what he did, which was to incite violence to make sure that the electoral votes weren't counted against him.
George, Trump's lawyers also argue that when Trump did use inflammatory words, such as urging the mob to fight like hell, that he meant fight in a figurative sense and about election security as a principle that they should fight for generally. What do you make of that?
Well, again, You have to look at the entire context of his words. And he was telling people that their democracy was going to